So one is the most basic risk, which is unauthorized access. If you are giving access from outside, if somebody compromises the user credentials, your access is compromised, right? That's the basic. Second is your increase in attack surface area. Now, when I say increase in attack surface area, what happens is, it's not necessarily the applications, it's also the endpoints. Because when you are inside the LAN, when you're using your company owned systems, right, within the LAN, you still have a greater deal of control on it. At least your monitoring is much, much higher, right? So in this case, what happens is endpoints which are distributed all over the place and now start going to access these applications. So your attack surface is dramatically going to increase. A direct next step to that is a malware can infect that system, and from there it can move to your corporate network. So these three, the top three, if you see, are more threats which are of an external nature. The last threat is one of the biggest threats, which we call as insider threat, which is data leakage by the employee itself, right? Because they're outside the network now, it's very difficult to enforce so many controls, so the employee can easily leak the information. So how do you protect from these risks while providing access and ensuring that productivity is not hampered? So this is the basis on which we have designed our work from home solution. You can look at a typical organization setup here, right? So, you have your data center, or this can also be cloud, doesn't matter. Typically, you will have a LAN setup, and people will access through VPN, and they will be, accessing these applications. Now, if you see what are the challenges in just allowing people to use VPN access today? Let us say an organization already has got VPN. They will just say, I will buy more licenses, and more people can just log in and start accessing. One of the biggest challenges is going to be performance, and we already are talking to few customers who are already facing this. So they enabled VPN access, and then VPN we know is all appliance based. So it's got a certain finite limit, capacity limit. Once the capacity hits, either connections start getting disconnected or it becomes very, very correct. So that's definitely not scalable. The other uh, option that people are looking at is, how can we make sure, 50% of staff work from home and 50% from outside. But with yesterday's announcement, that is also out of the window. So now, what is the easiest way to do it? So before I get into the solution, I will also talk about what are other solutions that people are using. So VPN I already explained. The other solution is VDI, right? Where it is much more secure. But the challenge with VDI is if you don't have an existing deployment of VDI, it's very difficult to deploy one in such a short time and also make sure that it all works, right? So one is the operational effort, which is required in terms of, deploying VDI, setting up the infrastructure, configuring everything, and making a lot of changes in your existing setup to make sure it all works, plus the cost. So VDI is a very, very expensive proposition, both in terms of cost as well as, effort required. VPN is a challenge with capacity. So how do we solve this problem, right? So what we are saying is, you can use BlockArmour. So use, like I said, the gateway option that I showed you, right? Because you can't at this stage ask customers to go and deploy agents on their servers, right? So you use the gateway option, and you can allow remote access in a secure manner. So I'll talk about how we exactly do it. So if I go back to the architecture diagram, so you have an organization's DMZ, right? And the best part about large organizations is all the accesses, a lot of accesses are already given to the desktops. Now, again, like I said, I come from a large organization background, right? So I know what is the pain of trying to rewire these accesses in such a critical time. So you won't believe it, but many organizations will have applications which will have specific controls for the desktops in the LAN. So those applications can just not be accessed from remote. So what is the best way? The best way is to give you a secure remote desktop access to your desktop on the LAN, because all the accesses are wired there already. Any additional application checks and balances are already existing. You don't have to change any configuration outside. And all you have to make sure is it is fully secure, because RDP as a protocol has got a lot of inherent vulnerabilities, because that's the other challenge that you have to address. So if you make that RDP access fully secure and make sure that it cannot be accessed in an unauthorized way and prevent data leakage, I think the solution becomes very simple. Here you don't have to make any changes also in the environment, very minimal changes. So how does this work? So you have your, again, the users here, right? Now the other challenge, just before I get into the solution, again, this is something that came up yesterday. So one of the customers I was talking to said that he ordered 400 laptops just for work from home. He's got only 40. By the time the delivery of the remaining comes, it will be like 2 to 3 weeks already. So even that is not scalable. So can we have a solution where we can allow the employee to use his home computer? Because most organizations, employees will have at least one computer at home, which they can use for access, right? So the challenge is of course going to be security. So even in that situation, this solution will work very well. I'll explain how it works. So you deploy an agent, our agent on that particular desktop or laptop or whatever, whichever the employer given or employee owned, doesn't matter. We register that device on our controller. Now again, here we have the flexibility. Either you can use an instance of our controller on the cloud, or the organization can decide that they want to host the controller on-prem. That's also fine, right? Everything can be done remotely. Just a couple of days ago, we did a full remote installation in less than 6 hours for a customer in Bangalore, right? So the moment the agent is deployed, it registers with the controller and the digital ID is created. You deploy, once the digital ID is created, you know that this user and this device is already locked over here. Now we deploy our gateway in the DMZ of that organization, right? And all you have to do is make sure that access is available to the gateway from the access is open on the firewall to the gateway from the internet, right? Anybody can see it. And access is allowed from the gateway to the LAN systems on your RDP port, right? Nothing needs to be done at an installation level on the desktops. All you have to do is you have to change the Active Directory policy to make sure that RDP is enabled, because most organizations who are security savvy will not have RDP enabled on their desktops. Second, you have to make sure that the lease of these systems, if it is DHCP based, is increased or extended, so that this desktop IP does not change. The whole idea is the IP of this desktop should not change, right? Now what happens is this all you need to do is you have to create a policy here which says this user, this device can access their corresponding desktop on the LAN. So when the user logs into the agent, that is automatically picked in, goes to the gateway, it comes back to the controller for authentication. The mutual authentication is done, secure channel is built in, and the gateway makes sure that it gives a single connection to the desktop. Now here what you get is a micro segmented connection from your end user system to the desktop. So even if the user wishes, he cannot move around in the LAN. Even if he has got the password of the neighboring computer, he cannot use it. Even if this user has got this user's password, he cannot use it from his laptop. So it's a very controlled kind of environment that you give in a distributed ecosystem. The second big advantage that you have is this gateway is invisible, unlike your VPN controller. So I don't know if you saw the SANS advisory. So a couple of days ago, SANS came out with an advisory that every VPN controller that is there today has got at least 2 vulnerabilities. So have organizations first patch those vulnerabilities. Second, they are saying that you can actually DDoS the VPN gateway with as little traffic as 1 MB. So and these attacks are just going to increase as people start working from home, right? So it's so easy to disrupt an organization's business. So this gateway is invisible now, which means that although you have opened this gateway to the external world, only your authenticated users and devices can see and access it, right? So it becomes very, very secure. So we have taken care of the secured access part. Now, with our application whitelisting, which I talked about, we will make sure that only RDP as an application is allowed into the secured channel, which means that even if this particular laptop or desktop gets infected, that malware cannot travel into the tunnel. It is contained only within that system, right? And everything is working on RDP, correct? Now the only aspect that remains is of data security. Data security we are taking care of by ensuring that we implement that policy on RDP. So we say that you cannot do any file transfer via RDP. It's an Active Directory group policy, as most of you might be knowing. Just have to enforce that policy, single change on the Active Directory, which says that your data transfer via RDP is not allowed. Second, clipboard access via RDP is not allowed, which means that all this user can do is he can just log in into his system here, take an RDP of this desktop and start working. So it's very similar to the way that it goes into Office and works. So from a user experience perspective, user education perspective, also it's not cumbersome. It's very easy. He gets exactly the same look and feel that he gets when he walks into the office and works, because it's exactly his desktop, his or her desktop that that person is accessing.